We now find ourselves in a world where we understand how almost everything works, but we know the meaning of nothing.
We've actually solved the problem of immortality, but it's only for digital things.
Before we get into today's insights, I want to share something from the channel's backend. Right now, 96.5% of the people watching these videos aren't actually subscribed. Only a 3.4% of you have hit that button. Now, I love having guests, but my goal here is to build a community of people who are genuinely serious about leveling up their mindset and productivity. If you've been back to the channel more than once, or if you get value out of today's video, do me a quick favor, join the 3.4%. Hit subscribe. It lets YouTube know we're doing something right here, and it ensures you never miss a breakthrough. Let's get into it.
Language of John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word. But I think the real value of that has been the training in logic, really saying that mathematics works. The fact that it works is, for me, one of the strongest evidences that this is what I call a word-based universe. Because I'm interested in the bigger picture. Anything that raises questions about the nature of human identity. And I was first struck by the drive for artificial general intelligence. There's the notion of transhumanism. The idea is that we go beyond the human. It won't be organic brains, it'll be machine brains, that there will be some kind of merger between humanity and machines to have a transhuman, something that's beyond the human, and something that is, they hope, super intelligent, got all the human properties and much more. Yuval Noah Harari, and he's written a book called Homo Deus, the man God. And that really made me prick up my ears, because I know enough about this book here, the Bible, to realize that the drive for humans towards self-deification, making themselves gods. And you see it all through history. The ancient Babylonian emperors were regarded as gods. The Roman emperors started calling themselves gods and all the rest of it. And what Harari says is the 21st century has two big purposes. Number one, to solve the problem of physical death as a technical problem. The second agenda item, and he calls them agenda items for the 21st century, is to increase human happiness by bioengineering, cyborg engineering, mechanical implants, all this kind of thing, and turning humans, quote, into gods with a small g. In other words, this is the drive for a super intelligent human. We've only got started. And his point is, and from his atheist perspective, one can understand it immediately, evolution, unguided natural processes have brought us to this point. Now we're going to take it into our hands, and we're going to engineer humanity into the future very rapidly to approach this superhuman thing. Now, I hear that and I see that, but I see that as huge implications for one of the fundamental teachings that's behind, I would argue, Western civilization. And that is the notion that humans, like us, are made in the image of God as rational, moral beings. We haven't got to artificial general intelligence yet. That's still a pipe dream, but it's improving all the time. But we've got far enough. That is to what's called narrow AGI, which most of the stuff that works is. And that is posing a threat to human beings at all kinds of levels. Here you have a system, even now, that has got some of the qualities we normally associate with God. It appears to be omniscient. You can ask it any question. It is omnipresent through the internet, etc., etc. And therefore, already there are worship groups to worship AI. And in the end, you are bowing down to something that in the end is idolatrous because it is less than God. But it's very tempting to do that. Dr. Ian McGilchrist, the author of this fascinating book called The Matter with Things, and he has studied the fact that this brain has two hemispheres, two halves. Both halves are involved in almost every cognitive event, but the two different halves have different ways of paying attention to the world. One is narrow focus, the left side of the brain, and the other is the big picture. And he says what has happened historically in the West is for the last 500 or so years, we have concentrated on the narrow, rationalist, reductionist left side of the brain, and we've forgotten the right side that contextualizes everything so that, quote, we now find ourselves in a world where we understand how almost everything works, but we know the meaning of nothing. And what he calls for is to open this sphere up. And of course, that includes to beauty, culture, art, music, and religion. Step by step, he appears to be creating more room for God because God makes sense of the space he feels is very necessary to fulfill. And I find that absolutely fascinating.
But the whole idea of superintelligence is nothing remains. These things will get to be better than us at everything. AI is already better than us at a lot of things, in particular areas, like chess, for example. In terms of the amount of knowledge they have, something like GPT-4 knows thousands of times more than you do. There's a few areas in which your knowledge is better than its, and in almost all areas, it just knows more than you do.
When you think about advising your children on a career with so much that is changing, what do you tell them is going to be of value?
Well, that is a tough question to answer. I would just say, to sort of follow their heart in terms of what they find interesting to do or fulfilling to do. I mean, if I think about it too hard, it frankly can be dispiriting and demotivating. Because, I mean, I go through, I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into building the companies, and then I'm like, wait, well, should I be doing this? Because if I'm sacrificing time with friends and family that I would prefer to do, but then ultimately the AI can do all these things, does that make sense? I don't know. To some extent, I have to have deliberate suspension of disbelief in order to remain motivated. So I guess I would say just, work on things that you find interesting, fulfilling, and that contribute some good to the rest of society.
Yeah, a lot of these threats, it's very hard to, intellectually you can see the threat, but it's very hard to come to terms with it emotionally. Yeah, so that's why I mentioned plumbers. I think plumbers are less at risk. Legal assistant, a paralegal, they're not going to be needed for very long. If you get a big increase in productivity, everybody should be better off. But if you can replace lots of people by AIs, then the people who get replaced will be worse off, and the company that supplies the AIs will be much better off, and the company that uses the AIs. So it's going to increase the gap between rich and poor. Well, let me tell you why I think it's superior.
Okay.
It's digital. And because it's digital, you can simulate a neural network on one piece of hardware, and you can simulate exactly the same neural network on a different piece of hardware. So you can have clones of the same intelligence. Now, you could get this one to go off and look at one bit of the internet, and this other one to look at a different bit of the internet. And while they're looking at these different bits of the internet, they can be syncing with each other, so they keep their weights the same, the connection strengths the same. Weights are connection strengths. So this one might look at something on the internet and say, oh, I'd like to increase this strength of this connection a bit. And it can convey that information to this one, so it can increase the strength of that connection a bit based on this one's experience. So these two different copies of the same neural net are getting different experiences. They're looking at different data, but they're sharing what they've learned by averaging their weights together. Mm-hmm. And they can do that averaging at you can average 1 trillion weights. When these things die, suppose you take these two digital intelligences that are clones of each other, and you destroy the hardware they run on. As long as you've stored the connection strength somewhere, you can just build new hardware that executes the same instructions, so it'll know how to use those connection strengths, and you've recreated that intelligence. So they're immortal. We've actually solved the problem of immortality, but it's only for digital things.